As some of you will know, I have a habit of deleting my videos and podcasts. I do it because, as somebody pointed out, the Buddhist monks will spend weeks, maybe longer than that, producing a very detailed mandala, and they make it out of sand. So it's quite a skilled process, and then they just brush it away one day. The same thing for me. Life is in the moment. I don't like things that are old. I mean, some of those podcasts are four, maybe even 5 years old now. And while people like to hang on to things, I don't. My wife would tell you about that. I hang on to nothing. I think I've got about 5 photographs of me throughout my life. Anyway, so that's why they're not on YouTube. I do produce an archive of them on Patreon, just because people have asked for it, but I don't use it. I just throw the podcasts on there and the videos and forget about them. So that answers that question, hopefully. And I can hear people saying, oh, he's only done it so that we go to Patreon and he makes money. Yeah, dead right. You envious, nasty little people. No, not really. That's just the way I want to do it. I have no interest in the old stuff. Finally, before I get into this proper, the comments. I'm of two minds as I produce this, whether to leave the comments on or off. But I've got a feeling I'll leave them on because this outrageous video will annoy and upset a lot of people. And it'd be nice to see their whining and complaining. Right, so that's that. So, I want to start with this with a picture of what is called the can't even pronounce it. Ouroboros. That's how you pronounce it. Ouroboros. There are a couple of ways of pronouncing it, but that's one of them. Ouroboros. The Ouroboros was a snake. I think it goes back to Egyptian times, I think. Maybe earlier than that as well. It's just a symbol of a snake eating its own tail, depicting the nature of life. The mother who devours her own children. Nature being the mother who devours her own children. You know, clearly we're produced and we die. It's just a repetitive cycle that generations go through. Produce something, consume it. Produce something, consume it. Gurdjieff, in a similar vein, referred to something called the Trogo-Auto-Egocrat. You'll see why I'm talking about this in a moment. The Trogo-Auto-Egocrat, which is this self-devouring monster, everything eats everything else. And we are needed to produce the things that we'll eat and in turn be eaten. You can say, well, human beings are not eaten typically these days. Well, no, not as food in that sense, but we're eaten by society. A whole other podcast, but we are eaten, believe me. So procreation is the mechanism that the, here we go again, Ouroboros needs to ensure that it can continue this process of eating itself. If there's no new generations, then basically the Ouroboros would die, this self-eating monster. So, from a kind of traditional point of view, procreation serves a purpose of feeding the Ouroboros. Now, there is a process involved there where only the most fit, survival fit species and individuals survive, because it seems as though the Ouroboros is always looking for ever more survival fit species and individuals. Well, obviously it does. It wants things to survive so that they can in turn at some point be eaten. So let's be clear about this. Sex serves the great Ouroboros. Without sex, there'd be no new creatures, no new devouring. I'm not going to go into all that. I've given the outline of it. So, you would expect that the drive to keep producing the new generation, that nature would ensure that that drive is as strong as possible, and indeed it is. It's the sex drive. It's tyrannical. I mean, I think everybody listening to this will know that. It doesn't let you off the hook, maybe until you get to an age where you're no longer fit for procreation, at which point the sex drive may die away, either completely or to some extent. So it's really important that to nature that the sex drive pretty well overwhelms everything within us. Any aims, desires are all overshadowed by the sex drive. The only one that comes near to it is the desire for food. And in fact, that characterizes most creatures, food and sex. Now, in the human species, and let me just explain this for a moment. So when I use the term female, I'm really relating to a role rather than a sex as such, because some males have very female behavior, as you'll see when I go through this, and some females have very male behavior. So I'm kind of relating to a role rather than whether you're a man or a woman, although the findings that I'm going to present here are largely from evolutionary psychology, which, by the way, as Jordan Peterson says, probably won't last very long. Why? Because it's objective and evidence-based, and nobody wants that. What they want is some opinion, some fashionable idea about what a man or a woman is, or whatever. So he has quite a large number of fairly high-profile detractors who may kill it, although hopefully not. Anyway, so that's when I talk about male and female, I'm talking about roles, not particularly male or female sex. Although it is usually males who play the male role, and it is usually females who play the female role. Now, females are charged with bearing a child, taking it through the 9 months to when they give birth to it. And they have a much closer identification with it. They see it as part of themselves, obviously, mainly anyway. And they want a stable environment in which to raise their children. Now, it doesn't mean that they won't play fast and loose with sexual partners, which they may do at a certain age, but women are always, in terms of a partner to rear children, they are overwhelmingly looking for one thing, and that is that the male should have resources and be resourceful. Again, finding from evolutionary psychology. If you think that a woman is... Actually, this is going to be long, isn't it? I don't want to do these long anymore, but this is going to be long, so it's just the way it is. So, if you think that the overwhelming reason that a female has chosen you is because you're good looking, because you're charming, because you have a particularly large penis, or something, you're dead wrong. Usually, we're talking about usually here, not every case, but usually. They will have chosen you because you exhibit some features of being resourceful and having resources. There's a YouTube video, in fact there's a few, I'll try and dig one out and put it on the description underneath, of some guy who's got a Ferrari who just wanders around a particular, I think it may be the car park, and he waits for females to come into the car park, and he'll start some kind of conversation with them about anything. Oh, do you know the way to whatever? And he'll say towards the end of the conversation, he said, "Look, I really like you. Would you go on a date?" Typically the females say no. And then what he does is he walks up to his Ferrari in view of the females. A fair number of them change their mind. Oh, yeah, I could go for a date. Yeah, but you said you had a boyfriend. Oh, well, it's only a loose relationship. So, the female is looking for resources. It's just a biological thing. They want safe, predictable environment where they can raise their offspring. The man is charged with something much, much simpler, which is basically to fertilize the woman's egg. And a man could go and do that probably a dozen times a day if he was up to it, with different women. However, there is a slight problem with that approach to the whole thing for men. And that is that they want to make sure that their genes successfully thrive in life, the genes in their children. Because this is all about passing on genes. You remember Dawkins' selfish gene? It's all about passing on genes. And so there's an incentive for the man to hang around. Something within him doesn't particularly want to, but equally. So, men are torn, really. Whereas the woman definitely has her children, definitely wants to see them raised in a safe environment. The man, his only interest really is seeing that his genes don't making sure that his genes survive, that they're not destroyed in some way, from lack of resources or lack of care. So that's a kind of introduction to actually one more thing. Just as women are looking for resources in men are looking for sexual attractiveness in women. A woman reaches her what is called maximum reproductive potential when she's 20. All women will try and gravitate, even women who are younger than 20, it seems. You've got into puberty and maybe they're 17 or 18 or something. Will try to look a bit older, because 20 is the maximum reproductive potential age. And so men look for women who are around that age. You know the old story of older men going for younger women. And as women get older, they can become quite desperate because they can see their bodies aging. And for a woman, her appearance is everything to attract a male, and the best male she can. Because men judge women very often, again, evolutionary psychology. The finding is that men judge women overwhelmingly on their sexual appearance, on their sexual desirability. There's a whole pile of stats around that. hip to waist ratio. There's a particular one that men go for instinctively. Men like women with longer legs. Why? Well, because women with longer legs statistically have more kids. It may be that the man doesn't want kids, but that's not the point. The point is that he's driven by those desires. So that's the game. Women want resources, men want sexual attractiveness, basically. So let the games begin. Men, as I'm sure you know, if you're over the age of 12, well, no, seriously, if you're over the age of, 30, you'll probably know that men lie and exaggerate about their resourcefulness and resources. So they'll go out of their way to look as though they are more affluent than they actually are. So they'll buy maybe an expensive watch, or they'll buy themselves a Ferrari even though they can't afford it, or some reasonably prestigious car, maybe a 20-year-old they're probably worth more, but some older but prestigious car. And it's typical for a man, if he's dating a woman he really, really fancies sexually, he'll take her to an expensive restaurant, even maybe if he can't afford it. So men will lie about and try to give the impression that they are far more wealthy, have far more resources and resourcefulness than they actually have. I've got so many stories I could tell you there. I knew a guy who he would go around telling women that he had racehorses, that he had a yacht. The women were just like, oh wow. It turns out he had some kind of gambling sharing thing. I'm not quite sure what it was. He didn't own any racehorses. And his yacht was actually a barge that he could take up the Canal du Midi in France as a part share. But anyway, his banter got himself women. And I knew him, and he was with his latest conquest, and she was just learning that he was a blagger, that everything he talked about was just nonsense. And she just said in front of him, I was better off with my old partner. He had more money than this one. He didn't seem affected, actually. I would have been devastated by that, but he didn't care. He got the babe. So anyway, there you go, ladies. Men lie about their resources and resourcefulness. Similarly, women lie about their attractiveness and so on. Hence a huge cosmetics industry. Plastic surgery. They're effectively lying about their age, their sexual attractiveness, to attract a male who's got resources. This is all that's going on. In the main, not always, of course. If you have some different kind of relationship, then good for you. But this is what's generally happening. So, let's say a particular man and woman get together. He's convinced that she's sexually fertile. He possibly doesn't want kids in his mind, but his instincts and his body is saying, I want a really attractive 20-year-old. And let's say he's approximated to that with his partner. So he's in there. He wants to pass on his genes to as many women as possible. The problem is, if he goes and does that, then it takes away resources possibly from the children he has got. So, the men are kind of torn. The women, on the other hand, in a long-term relationship or marriage, want to be told that they are just as attractive today when they're 40 as they were when they were 20 and could attract almost any man they wanted. Of course, from the male's point of view, they're not as attractive. So what do some, not every, but what do some women do? They get a lover to reassure themselves that they're still attractive. And men will get a lover because they've got this urge to spread their genes as widely as possible. The mechanics of all this are fairly grotty. So a woman, for example, if she's taken on a lover, will typically stop having orgasms with her long-term partner or husband. She'll behave in a kind of derisory manner, really, towards her long-term partner. And she will seek, unwittingly, to meet her lover when she's ovulating, because that's her most fertile period. I mean, she doesn't know this, she's doing it instinctively. And what's more, she will orgasm with her lover because she wants his semen. The process of orgasm for a woman, so it's believed, helps push the semen higher into the uterus. So as I say, it's all fairly grotty stuff, but it's all kind of biological, and we put fancy wrapping around it, of course, Valentine's Day and all that kind of stuff. But that's what's going on. The whole thing is, again, psychologists have taken the behavior of the weaver bird as a fairly good approximation to the behavior of men and women. The male weaver bird will build a nest. These nests kind of hang from branches. And when he's built his nest, he'll go underneath the nest, basically hanging upside down, and flap his wings to say to the females, "Hey, look, I've got a really good nest." And the female will go and have a look. And if she doesn't like the nest, she'll go and have a look at another one. Yeah, it's the Ferrari Syndrome. So, all of the shenanigans, all the games that go on between men and women, men trying to make out that they're more than they are, women trying to make out they're more attractive than they actually are, the lies and the cheating and all the rest of it. The bottom line is, it's all about procreation and feeding the great Ouroboros. Nature doesn't really care about the dynamics, the morality, and all the rest of it of the way human beings pair together. It just wants more things that can go into the self-devouring cycle. I'm not explicitly an antinatalist, for the simple reason that these forces that I've been talking about, the force to procreate, is so strong, so overwhelming, that it will always be the case that human beings produce more fodder for nature, more kids. But people like David Benatar, I think that's his name, are to be admired for analysing the situation of bringing children into the world. That will be another podcast, but his basic argument is that we should not harm anybody. By bringing a child into the world, you are creating harm, because everybody suffers and is harmed in this life. Anyway, that is another podcast. This went on way longer than I intended it to do, but there you go.